What is up, everybody? Everyday Angler here. We're going to be doing the second video in my Panfish fly tying series, the one that we're going to tie today. I actually would like my subscribers, so everybody watching the video, to help me name it. I've been calling it the Silly Leech. It's a pattern that I originally used Zonked strips on and tied it bigger for bass. And I've just gone to, it just catches fish like crazy. One of my favorite ways to fish is to dredge, even for panfish. So this little thing is it's the exact same fly. I'm gonna do it once I start my bass fly series. I'll do the version I tie of this for bass. It's a little squirrel tail. We're using natural pine squirrel, and I usually just grab the whole skin and squirrel dubbing, some silver ribbing, some silly legs, and then the exact same material for a collar. Alright, so here it is. Like I said, this fly was really just made to tick bottom, which is what I really like to do. A lot of that style fishing on floating line, you know, a proper tapered leader, or just a straight piece of like 10-pound for panfish aren't really leader shy at all. Fluorocarbon. And this thing is just made to tick, 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 tick on the bottom. This little squirrel tail is kind of jiggling up here along with the silly legs. And the collar just gives it some bulk. And I add a little bit of this silver wire just for some segmentation. So let's get started. This fly is one of the flies. I really like these hooks. They're from Wholesale Fly Company. So this is just your basic jig hook. This is a Wholesale Fly Company hook. I've never had any problems out of these jig hooks from them. And I like the size 10. I just like the hook. There's a good gap from my hook point to the eye of the hook. You can see how big of a gap that is. I really don't like using the curve type Euro hooks where the hook point, it almost seems like it curves into the bend. They probably work fine when you're setting the hook straight up, Euro nymphing, but with these guys, a lot of the times you're stripping into the fish, really not even realizing it took it, because you're just ticking bottom, little tiny pops with the fly line. All of a sudden you just come tight to something, and you know, there's a saying, hook sets are free, and you set the hook and it's either a rock or a fish. And that's the best way I can describe how I fish this thing. But like I said, the star of the show really is this Spawn Flyfish football jigs. They're just, when I saw them, I was like, yeah, I gotta have some of these. Really, the only thing I see that's different, of course, if you're fishing in heavy current, this thing is going, these are the 6mm ones, by the way. This is about, and I've tied a bunch of them. I've put 7mm heads on here just to have a small fly to throw on an 8-weight. But 6mm is about as heavy as I can go before it gets kind of not fun to cast this thing on my glass 4-weight. So that's what I use, because I just want to make sure this thing gets to the bottom and stays there like we were talking about. So I'm sliding that bead on there. Another thing, when you're using just a regular round tungsten bead, I have a feeling this fly might kind of like lay over a bit more. This football really almost acts like dumbbell eyes, where this thing can just sit flat. So got my bead on there. Next thing we're gonna do is some 020 lead wire, maybe 8 wraps. I like to put some super glue. And really what these lead wraps are for, not only for weight obviously, but to keep this bead oriented right, because it has a pretty large gap, because it's made to, a lot of these tungsten bead, the regular ones, the slotted tungsten beads, you almost have to pinch the barb on a lot of hooks just to get them on there. And these guys were made so you don't have to do that. So there we go. I just put a little glue in between my lead wraps and the bead and push these lead wraps into it. I barely got any left, but I'm going to be using Danville 140 on this fly. And I'm just going to build a little thread dam right there with some light wraps over the lead wraps. A little section of this wants to come off, that's fine. Just making sure that's nice and secure. And then I'm gonna run my thread all the way back to right before the bend of the hook. So almost a little before that barb. Cut this off, and like I said, we're gonna be using, I just buy the whole skins because I like them. I use them so much. This is just natural pine squirrel. And when I'm picking one out, like I said, the original pattern I tie for bass and I use Zonked, but the Zonked was just kind of like too much for this smaller fly in a size 10. So I like the squirrel because the fur or the hair on this thing is just a little shorter. So this is kind of the perfect piece we're looking for. You can see how thin that is. And I'm gonna go just a hook shank length. I'm gonna peel these fibers back and cut this just like that. And I'm gonna tie this in right here. And like I said, another thing too is a lot of the panfish, when it comes with panfish, you'll hear a lot of people just say you can use trout flies for them, and that's very true. The difference between the panfish flies I tie, probably the smallest fly I tie for panfish is a size 12, is because you can go out there with like size 14, 16 elk hair caddises and stuff, and you'll catch tons of panfish. They'll just be 3-inch panfish, you know, and they'll be, when you do catch a 6-inch or up panfish, you're going to be performing surgery on it because they swallow, I mean, they just swallow flies. Like, they take game changers and stuff. So don't worry about this little size 10 thing being too big to scare a panfish. Okay, that was a little rant. Artistic wire from Michaels. You can use the UTC, whatever you got. This is 26 gauge in silver. And this is the only thing this is gonna do is for ribbing. I'm gonna lay this wire down where I started my lead wraps, just to kind of even out. And just be careful your thread, because this wire will cut your thread. And I'm just gonna even it out so we got an even tapered body here for when I put my dubbing down. And for the dubbing, up here where these hides connect, you can see this is this white, almost belly fur of the squirrel. Up here we kind of have some of the same natural color. I literally just kind of clear my flying desk off a bit, and I just start cutting this stuff right off of the hide. Obviously I'm not cutting this off of like Zonked sections that I'm gonna use. And if you just collect all that stuff, it makes really cool dubbing. You can also use the face of the squirrel and all that, and that would work fine. See that? That's pretty cool dubbing, and it matches. It's gonna match everything perfectly. The only thing I'm gonna do before I put that dub on is cinch everything down with some Sally Hansen's. And we're gonna start building my dubbing noodle. And instead of trying to build like a really long dubbing noodle, I want to control it more, so I'm just gonna do little by little. Sometimes there'll be a little piece of skin in there, just pick that out. And this stuff is like super buggy. I also like the natural pine squirrel because it's almost like one of those colors that if it's clear water, you're fine. If it's a little darker, you're fine, you know. I mean, this color to me literally looks like gravel. So we'll be fine. And that actually finished off perfectly. I brought that noodle, the dubbing noodle, the noodle, up to halfway up my lead wraps. Now we're gonna get this ribbing. Create some little ribs. Tie that down. And this artistic wire will just spin off like the regular stuff. Just get your scissors and kind of push that excess wire down so it doesn't cut your thread. Okay. Now we're going to come in with some silly legs. In this platform, if you watch my previous video for the mini mud bug, it really is the same exact platform. We're just using Squirrel, a jig hook, and a tungsten bead, right? These are silly legs, like a gravel color. It's gonna match this Squirrel almost perfectly. You could use hotspot legs and stuff. I don't have an exact brand or anything for you because I will buy like some hairline silly legs and stuff sometimes when I really need a specific color. But I go to eBay or Amazon and buy like 100 skirts for spinner baits and stuff, and they have like a bunch of cool different colors on them. So these are just some I picked out of this skirt, and they kind of match perfectly with our Squirrel. And I'm just gonna pick out 2 of these, trap them with my thread right here, tie them down, do a few wraps right in front of them. I'm gonna grab them with my left hand and kind of stretch them out so they lay on either side of this fly. Just like that. And just cinch them down. Now, I'm gonna create a dubbing loop again. Right behind that bead. And then I'm gonna run my thread back and run it back up to the bead. And guess what just happened? Give me 1 second and I'll try to save this. Alright, we're using brown thread now, that's fine. Got my loons dubbing spinning tool, and with the same hide that I used to make the tail, or you can look for a thicker hide like this. We don't want this too full though. You just look for, and Squirrel is going to be pretty consistent with the length, but you can look for one that kind of has longer hairs on it. If you don't have this and you want to get into dubbing loops, you should get one. Go to your fly shop or something. These are Stanfo material clips, and this is how easy they make this collar. Instead of trying to grab this hide and stick it in my dubbing loop, I'm just going to put it in this material clip. Try to cut as close to the hide as I can because there's, you know, these Squirrel hairs are so short. Just make sure you don't have any little pieces of skin like this one right there, because then that's gonna bulk this dubbing loop up a crazy amount. Okay, and I'm gonna kind of push back, or if these kind of are a lot shorter than the rest of them, just take them out, because it's gonna make this collar look weird. So there we go. I'm gonna put this collar in my dubbing loop. I'm gonna give this some good spins. Oh yeah. That looks good. I usually won't do this, but because I ran out of thread and all that, I don't want anything coming unraveled, so some Sally Hansen's for some extra insurance on that thing. Alright, so I got this really nice collar about to go on there. And as I put this, I'm gonna palmer all these, I'm gonna start bringing all these fibers back. Just stroking them back every turn. We don't want nothing too crazy, but there we go. Okay. The brown thread actually kind of ended up looking kind of cool on here, honestly. Alright, just trapped that, cutting the excess of my loop out. And of course, I'm gonna top her off. A little bit of Sally Hansen's on the thread. 1, 2, make sure that Sally Hansen's is soaking in there good. And a half hitch. And cut it off. Last thing is our silly legs are still here. I'm just gonna cut this a little bit shorter than the length of the tail. And there it is. Obviously you can try this in different colors. I prefer like this natural color, and a lot of the like for bass, when I'm tying this in the bigger size using Zonked strips, I tie them chartreuse, all types of crazy colors. So but yeah, that's it. Comment below what you'd name this fly. Like I said, I had it named the Silly Leech, but I'm not too crazy about that name. And this thing, I have like tons of variations. Like I tied a bonefish one, a bass one, a carp one, which this really is kind of like my carp one, even though it is a panfish fly. So thank you for watching, everybody. Leave your comments below, like the video, and I'll catch you guys next time on another episode of Everyday Angler.